So I entitled this talk, The Purifying of the Right, because ever since working 7 years ago, 7 or 6 years ago, the collaboration ended in 2016 with Dr. Peterson. I've been having to rethink a lot of the things that we worked on. I feel like ex, you know, for lack of a better word, an ex-Nazi reflecting on his past crimes. And sometimes it is really that. It is criminal what we've done. But I thought I'd structure this in terms of the Kabbalistic tree of life. The Jewish mystics imagine the spheres of consciousness in terms of a tree of life. Some people call it the ladder of Jacob. It starts off with the lowest, most concrete world and goes up to the world of thought, the world of inspiration, and the world beyond any comprehensible wisdom. And in some ways, general politics have affected how Jews understand Torah and understand our religion. Even though we pretend that we're completely isolated, it is not realistic. It is not possible. We interpret the Torah through the lens of politics. I've heard religious Jews saying all the time, the right path is the only right path, or that leftist Jews are worse than Nazis. I think these are just complete detachment from reality, and this is something that needs to be cleansed. Now, I don't know if the work that I did with Peterson helped to make such a thing happen, to make the world more right-wing. I think Jews have always been like this, but it's certainly given them some kind of intellectual, not just intelligibility, but justification. They don't really have it. Peterson's views are debunked over and over again, and I care to debunk them some more, but it doesn't really matter. These people just want to control the frame and control the narrative. So anyways, going back to the tree of life, I thought I'd make this stream of consciousness with as few edits as possible, and low effort, minimalist, low budget, just a stream of consciousness, and to make this spell into the world, because our words have power. Everybody's words have power. The thoughts that we conjure up today will have an effect in places that we don't expect to, because as the Jewish tradition would tell us, that's how ideas work. Ideas don't only transmit from a person-to-person basis, but it transmits across space and across time, because we're all connected in this higher world. And we may only unconsciously recognize that some things have changed. But by us thinking different thoughts, I think things will change. And what I like to start with is this sphera, which is an aspect or a isolated concept or organ of the Sephirotic tree of life, the Kabbalistic tree of life. And Malchut, if you look it up, it's translated as kingdom, and it is on the bottommost part of the chain of emanations from the higher world to the lowest. It is the world of action. It is the feminine. It is, in fact, the divine feminine. And many times we talk about the divine wife being separated from the divine husband. Well, this is one permutation of it. Some people identify the Western world as Malchus. Perhaps America certainly has a disproportionate impact on the world. Perhaps there are other ways of understanding it. But I like to purify this right-hand path. And one thing I realized is that the left and right-hand path in occult sciences and the magical sciences, completely independent discipline from Jewish tradition, even though it draws very heavily from Kabbalistic texts, is that the left-hand path in occult is basically the left-hand path in politics. The left-hand path in politics is a path, along with the magical path, the path of individualism, the path of rejecting sometimes authority and exploring your own way. Whereas the right-hand path is about surrendering yourself and surrendering, your individuality for an authority, for somebody else's will and for a collective. And oftentimes you see the dynamics of the left and the right And much of the work I conducted with Peterson, the research on pornography, for instance, on revealing some of the negative aspects of pornography, which was just taboo to talk about, even in scientific circles. Things have completely changed since our times. I'm not even one of the most important proponents of that change. There's certainly been important people like Marnia Robinson and Gary Wilson from Your Brain on Porn, who started that movement, were so pivotal to spreading that message. And that message is not a perfect message. These people, as much as I agree with some of the merits that they do, they were not scientists, and some of the things that they did were questionable from a scientific perspective. When I had data that contradicted what they said, they would not participate in expanding that idea further, even though, if you were interested in advancing the cause of science, you would continue. I think in terms of the right-hand path, I desperately want to rekindle some of the good of that, right? And so we'll try to focus on the Malchut aspect of it, which is the aspect of practical behavior, the aspect of practical action, and how society is currently shaped. And right now, I feel like it's completely off the kilter. It's going towards fascism. The right is organizing, as my friend Amir said. He's an international relations student, and I think he's quite prescient. But at the same time, when I was doing research with Peterson from 2012 to 2016, maybe even a little before that, I felt the oppression of the left very, very strongly. So it throws into question, right? What is right and wrong? Is logic, is your intuition the guide to truth? I mean, all these things have to be eventually unpacked. And so with this stream of consciousness, it's more for my journaling, but again, a spell into the world that hopefully things will change towards the better, because God, I feel like, God Almighty, things need to change. I think things are quite desperate. We have 1 in 10 people who rely on food banks. We have homeless shelters who are constantly overcapacitated. This is not a tolerable situation. Things are continuously sliding down, and people don't recognize. It's not a matter of just cleaning your room. The system is broken. The system is tilted always towards the wealthy. It's always towards the powerful, and so we do need some kind of balancing, some kind of socialism. Not all the way towards communism, but there needs to be some kind of well distribution and support for the poor, for the needy, social welfare and social security, because the way that things are going, it is not good. And economically speaking, right, not to let the right claim all the economics, these things will pay off. Well, hopefully, I mean, if we do it correctly. But again, so much of the philosophies on the right there's a lot of truth to it, like working out, for instance, and NoFap, and all these things. They have so much merit, or at least it did at the time. But now, my personal experience with them is that how much can you do these things and expect things to improve? Because for many people, you can do these things to the letter. And, well, at least for me, I was one of those the first people who studied under Peterson and took his philosophies to the umpteenth extent. Right? We talked about exercises back in 2012 and how it's, if you want to be smart, this is one of the best things you can do. And I used to exercise every other day. I used to be abstinent from all kinds of vices. And at the same time, it didn't matter. I mean, for a Chinese person in this society, it doesn't matter how excellent you are. There are certain fields, like social services or social work, predominantly black and white fields, that may never accept you. I mean, there may be, there might be people there who fit the mold, but they are still in a minority. I personally found it tremendously difficult. and under a lot of scrutiny. And so many of these things, if we continue to do them, it'll just lead to burnout. It doesn't seem to be the solution. Yes, I think they're important. I think it's important to be healthy, important to work out. But as influencers like Noah Samson and Elliot Sang, the leftists too, they talk about this stuff like this ethic of strength, this ethic of power, this ethic of, might over right. This has been such a toxic thing that I've found, that I've experienced over the years. And it borders on fascism at worst. And I mean, at best, this is not so much better. It's a detachment from reality, because if you want to discuss ideas and all you can do is to bash another person and to attack their character or try to shame them into submission or do whatever, this is a sign of fascism. This is using your might, exercising your might to silence opposite opinions and commit logical fallacies, and not to speak of even that. So how are we going to find a way through this? How are we going to purify the right hand path? Because right now it's so corrupt. It is so corrupt. There's so much violence in the name of religion now. It was brought to consciousness after 9/11 with the four horsemen of the atheist apocalypse: Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchin, Daniel Dennett, and forgot the fourth one, but I think it's Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, Daniel Dennett. Oh, I can't believe Richard Dawkins. Gosh, the best for the last. These people brought to light that there is danger to organized religion, and now we see it. We see how in the name of Orthodox Judaism, that people are perpetuating genocide, basically, onto another people. Mass slaughter at the very least, and people are celebrating. Jews are celebrating, and Muslims are celebrating the death of their enemies, much like a mirror. None of these are healthy situations, and is it religion? I think it's the right hand path gone astray, gone awry. I think it's people becoming inhuman. I think we've gone too much to the extreme. In the Kabbalistic tree of life, there are three branches. There is the branch of Bina from the left side, which is the mother. And that mother emanates down into Gevura, which is severity, restriction. And that's also a feminine side. And then it's Haid, which is submission. In the middle, there is Das, which is, I might translate as application. It is between inspiration and understanding. It goes into Tiferes. Tiferes is balance. It is a balance between kindness, which is on the right, and Gevura, which is on the left. And then goes down into Yesod, and then Malchut. Foundation, sexual purity, and then the feminine earthliness that we're currently focused on. The right-hand side is Chachma, inspiration, the seminal spark before an idea comes to full conscious realization. And then you have Chesed under it, kindness. After that is Netzach, which is victory, perhaps dominance. And we're not in a state of balance. And right now, I desperately want to resuscitate these things that's transformed into the red pill culture, the manosphere. Toxic masculinity is at an all-time high. Transphobia, all these things. Jungians and even Freudians talk about how the pregenital condition of man, of a human being, is bisexual. At inception, in the womb, we have no gender, we have no sex. We only become differentiated afterwards, perhaps through prenatal testosterone. But as the paper that I did with Peterson showed, it was far from clear that testosterone had such a tremendous impact. It was completely overestimated. He didn't really care. He didn't care about the validity of his ideas. He didn't care about peer review. At that time, he was completely gone. And that is the fundamental of the problem, is that we don't care about empirical evidence anymore. And that's incredibly problematic. This is anti-intellectualism at its core. We put people like Jordan Peterson on this pedestal. We put people like rabbis and priests on a pedestal. We forgot that we have our own faculty. We must use our own faculty of discovery, of empirical testing, of reasoning. And right now we have none of that. People in general don't care. I can shout you down. I can shame you, embarrass you. This is not the way to go. Where is that sense of exploration? Where is that sense of compassion? This is completely gone. We've completely gone from balance. There is detachment. Maybe there never was any attachment, but right now things are worse than ever. And in part, capitalism is to blame. This thing that has unilaterally changed modern society. First, empire building, well, before that, even slavery, and now contemporary slavery, the subjugation of the whole world under this dominion, the survival of the fittest, this ethos of the jungle. It is one manifestation of the right-hand path. We blame the left for high crime. What about education? What about third spaces? Spaces where youths can exist so they don't have to resort to problematic behavior. What about preventive education? Preventive psychological care for people? Psychiatric hospitals are like prisons today. They're not there to help people. They're not there to reform. Their reputation from people that I've spoken to, and I understand these are anecdotal, there's always more to understand, but it's a nightmare to be hospitalized today. And so we need to be helping people. We need to be helping people who are disabled, people who are of ethnic minority background, because it's not a criticism of you in terms of your intrinsic quality as a white person, but as a white person, you do have disproportionate privilege in this society. This is the way that this world works. This is how the world is, the Western world has been formed. And it doesn't hurt to become aware of that, because just like as any male, we have to come to terms with male privilege, that we don't have to worry about being sexually assaulted in a dark alley as much as females do. This is something that we have to be aware of. We have to understand. And this just reminds me of a debate I had whilst working under Peterson with people who spoke about a man who stood up for women being catcalled, and he was, I think, put into the hospital by these guys. And my argument back then was that, well, he should have been smart and to stay out of something like that. And maybe today I would still say something like that. But at the same time, it is really unfortunate that we can tolerate these kinds of things. And I hope that in hindsight, these people were prosecuted. I mean, it wasn't really a logical flaw, I suppose. I mean, logically, there was there's no error in what I said. It was more the framing that we completely neglect, or I completely neglected for sure, but by extension Peterson also, the importance of social justice and community. And this is something that definitely needs to change. There definitely needs to change. There are other things like comparing social justice warriors to cultural revolutionary people in Maoist China. I remember doing that and posting something like that on Facebook, making that comparison. But that to me is, it's true. There are similarities, and in some ways in some ways it's still incorrect. It doesn't take into account the historical context of the West, which is not Maoist China, right? These people are performing something. It is the only thing that's going to work against institutions who are driven fundamentally by profit. And they do need to be criticized. The pressure does need to be put on them, and that's the only thing that works. So I suppose this is the first part in terms of understanding and hopefully trying to correct some of those mistakes that have percolated down from all the way from a research level, from the inspirations that were attained at the time until now, which on the level of behavior, on the level of society, there is just so much that's off kilter. There's nothing wrong with working out. There's nothing wrong with, approaching girls with grace and tact. But all the extreme pathologies have come to fore, and people are more isolated than ever. What we did just didn't work. What I wanted to do with Peterson when I was researching sex differences was to try to heal this divorce, this 50% divorce rate, right? To make peace between the masculine and the feminine. We are not doing that. We are far from doing that. Peterson did not do that. He pretends to, and he likes to talk like he did. He didn't do that at all. He interrupted that work. And you know what? The Torah has very strong things to say about people who abandon their calling. Curses spelled on those who abandon a mitzvah. And unfortunately, well, I'm not gonna discontinue. I know he suffered, and I had people pray for him, and he wrote me letters of thanks. But what does it matter? What does it matter if you don't continue what we started? It's just so disappointing, and there's so much work to do.